Hello and welcome back to my channel. So this is a continuation of the Saria artwork that I already had a video posted of the inking process of this drawing. So right now, as usual, just going in and laying out the base shadows for the skin. Now I'm going in with a red just to have a little bit more vibrancy and color into her skin tone. And since Saria's outfit and the surroundings are mostly green, I'm adding a lot of green bounce light. I'm going over it with a little bit more tan just to help balance out how much green I added and help it blend in, even though I'm not adding a neutralizer this time. I wanted to keep the vibrancy of the green intact. This was my favorite part, doing her hair. I love the shades of green that happened in her hair. And now I'm going in adding a little bit of blue just to help balance out the green. Green, if you can use yellow as a highlight color or like yellow green and then shade it with blue or blue green, it just is the prettiest shading you can ever do. Green with yellow highlights and blue undertones. So again, I'm just paying attention to the types of fabric that I'm trying to convey. So most of her outfit is going to be matte and not very shiny, but for her boots, you'll see later, I do want to have a little bit more shine just to help them pop. So now I'm going in doing her undershirt, and I'm paying close attention to the way I did the line art, because the line art will actually tell me a lot about how I need to shade it. Like, for instance, in the arm that's closest to the viewer, I added a bump on either side to show that the fabric had a fold around her forearm. So I'm making sure that the way I do the shading matches with how I do the line art, and it helps it look a lot more realistic. And now her boots, her shiny boots. So now I'm doing her eyes, and one thing that I want to mention is when you're drawing eyes and you're coloring them, if half of the face is in shadow, something I see a lot that doesn't really make sense is that people add highlights to both eyes in the same exact place, when in reality the highlight would only be on one eye. But characters will always look weird. Anything in art will look weird if it doesn't have any highlights. It'll just look lifeless. So now I'm doing her fairy companion, and I think it really worked out because her fairy is actually pink. So I ended up having a lot of pink bounce light, such as on the hand and in her hair, and I even added pink highlights to both of the eyes since both eyes would be able to see the highlight. So now I'm starting to work on the background. So the most important part of the background I find was this tree stump. It's her tree stump, so she always sits on it. And I looked up references of tree stumps, and I wanted to make sure that this was the most realistic thing because it's also the most it's the thing that's in the foreground that's from the background. And again, like I mentioned in the line art video, having the shadow that she makes from sitting on the stump on the actual stump helps solidify the fact that this is an illusion of 3 dimensions. In a moment, this will kick into hyper time lapse because it took a long time to get the background to look the way I wanted it to. So I'm just going in and solidifying the tree stump and adding the finishing details on it. And then going in, starting with the grass, and the grass was very hard for me to figure out how to do properly, but I ended up layering it and it looks really nice in the end. So the background is actually part of the video game that Saria comes from. The walls in the part of the game where she's sitting on her stump actually have sheer cliff sides, which is probably just because of how old the game was, and it was just what they could do to keep the player in the box of the room. So it's not actually a forest. It's a sheer cliff face with trees on top of it, which I thought was funny, but it still looks pretty, so I decided to make that the background of the piece. It took me a lot of time to get to look the way I wanted to, but in the end I think it looks really cool. So periodically, while I'm doing the background, I'll just keep on smoothing it out with this layer of green just to help pull everything in the background together. And now I'm adding a little bit more depth to the grass and making sure that the shadows match. So from the tree stump to the grass, that shadow all makes sense. Adding a little bit more blue to the background also helped make it a little bit more depth of space. It gives it more depth. So now, when you're in the game and you play Saria's song, what happens is a ring will appear of green light, so I tried to add that. And finally, I'm adding the finishing touches like the sparkles from the fairy, the leaves that come from playing Saria's song, and the tiny little lights that fly around the forest. I really love how this image turned out. This illustration is absolutely gorgeous, and there's links to my social media and Etsy shop in the description. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!